Hi, welcome. I am Helmut Licht. Thank you for joining me. In this particular video, I would like to explain to you the Brotherhood of Light method of predicting the weather using astrology. All right, let's get started. In this particular system, we have to create 3 charts. One is called the temperature chart. I call that the seasonal chart. The second one is called the air movement chart, and the third one is the moisture chart. With respect to the temperature chart, we have to ask 2 questions. What is the season? And when did the season begin? Well, we know that we have 4 seasons. Spring begins when the sun moves into Aries. Summer begins when the sun moves into Cancer. Fall begins when the sun moves into Libra, and winter begins when the sun moves into Capricorn. In this particular video, I will be concentrating on the weather here in Baltimore from February the 10th to about February the 20th. February the 10th lies in the middle of winter, and winter begins when the sun moves into Capricorn, and that happened December 21st, 2016 at 5:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And now we have to make a chart for that exact moment. And here's the chart. December 21st, 2016, and the sun is in 0 Capricorn. We will discuss this chart in detail later. Next, we have the air movement chart, and we have to ask ourselves, when was the last time that Mercury entered a new sign, moving either direct or retrograde? With respect to February the 10th, 2017. And then we erect a chart for that moment. It happened on February the 7th at 9:33 GMT. And this is the information we use using Baltimore's longitude and latitude and time zone, which is 5 hours earlier, which means if it's 9:33 a.m. in Greenwich, then it is 4:33 a.m. in Baltimore. And here's the chart using solar fire. I had to adjust the time by 3 minutes to get Mercury to 0 Aquarius. We will discuss this chart later. Next, we have the moisture chart, and that is based on the phases of the moon. We have 4 phases per month, roughly 7 days each. The new moon, the first quarter moon, the full moon, and the third quarter moon. The 2 phases we are concerned with are the first one on February the 10th, and the second one on February the 18th. Because my weather forecast period is from February the 10th to February 20th. Here is the first lunar phase, sun opposite moon, which is the same as a full moon. And here's the second one, sun square moon. Before we cook a meal, we have to get the ingredients that make up the meal. Not only do we have to get the ingredients, but also determine how much of every ingredient we are going to use. The same goes for a construction site. Before we build a building, we have to get all the material that is necessary to construct the building. And not only all the material, but again, how much of each we are going to need. By the same token, before we start to construct an analysis of a weather situation, we have to get the ingredients for the analysis. And not only that, but also determine how much weight and importance we assign to every ingredient. Our ingredients are the planets and the signs, and the planet's importance or strength is determined by their house position and the aspects they form between each other. Here is a list of all the planets. The second column shows their moisture qualities, the third column their temperature qualities, and the fourth column their air movement qualities. Thus, the Sun is a dry planet. It's warm and it's calm. The Moon is wet, cool, and produces a breeze, and so on. Here are the signs. Taurus is wet, moderate, and calm. Gemini is dry, cold, and windy. As far as weight, strength, influence of the planet is concerned, you should follow the following guidelines. You can find these guidelines and much more information by Googling reading astrological weather charts. We find that 1/2 of total weather influence of any one of these three types of weather charts should be judged from the fourth house. In this, the most important factor is any planet which is actually in the fourth house. The sign it is in and the aspect it makes are first to be considered. Then, as second in importance, comes the sign on the cusp of the fourth house. And finally, the planet ruling the sign on the cusp of the fourth, the sign it is in, and the aspect it makes. This may sound complicated, but when we start working with an actual chart, it will become very obvious. Whereas the fourth house, as we just discussed, influences half of all the weather in the three charts, the first house influences 1/4 of all the weather in the three charts. And we can apply the exact same method of analyzing it that we used in the fourth house. We ask ourselves, are there any planets in the first house? If so, what sign is that planet in, and what aspects does it make? Then, what is the sign on the cusp of the first house? What is the ruler of that sign? In what sign is that ruler located? And what aspects does that ruler make? So far, we have established that the fourth house influences half of all the weather, and the first house influences 1/4 of all the weather. That adds up to 3/4. There's still 1/4 remaining, and that quarter is divided in two 1/8 sections, and we'll discuss these next. And to make things easier, I will discuss this particular 8th section using our three charts: the temperature chart, the air movement chart, and the first moisture chart. Before I do that, though, I would like to read you the actual text from the book. We find that 1/8 of the total weather influence of any of the three types of weather charts should be judged from the planet for which the chart is erected. In a temperature chart, the sign in which the planet ruling the sign the Sun is in should be given consideration. Thus, if the Sun has just entered Aries, the sign Mars is in influences the weather, because Mars rules Aries. Let's see how this works out using the actual charts. This is our temperature chart, which is owned by the Sun. It is located in Capricorn. The ruler of Capricorn is Saturn. Saturn is located in Sagittarius, which is a hot sign. This is our air movement chart, which is owned by Mercury. Mercury is in Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by two planets: Saturn, which is located in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a windy sign. And also Uranus. Uranus is located in Aries, and that is also a windy sign. Here is the first moisture chart. It is owned by the moon. The moon is in Leo. Leo is ruled by the sun, and we find the sun to be in Aquarius. Aquarius is a dry sign. A quick summary. 1/2 of all the weather influence comes from the 4th house. 1/4 of it comes from the 1st house, and 1/8 of it comes from the sign in which we find that planet which rules the owner of the chart. We have one more 1/8 to cover, and that is next. I'm reading this as the final consideration of the 4 factors. We find that 1/8 of the total influence of any one of those 3 types of weather charts should be judged by the planets in angular houses. That means 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th. If in a temperature chart they are predominantly hot in nature, it tends toward hot weather. If in an air movement chart the planets in angles are mostly windy, this influences toward wind. If in a moisture chart the planets in an angle are wet, rain may be expected insofar as this 1/8 influence is concerned. A quick look at the temperature chart. We have Saturn in the 1st house. Saturn is cold. The Sun, which is warm. Uranus in the 4th house. Uranus is cold. Moon in the 10th house. The moon is cool. And then Jupiter also in the 10th. Jupiter is warm. In our air movement chart, we have Pluto in the 1st house. Pluto produces wind. And Mercury, which is also a windy planet. In our first moisture chart, which is good from February the 10th to about the 17th, we have Saturn in the 4th house. Saturn is wet. And then we have Venus and Mars in the 7th house. Venus is wet, Mars is dry. In our second moisture chart, which kicks in about February the 18th, we have Jupiter in the 4th house. Jupiter is dry. And we have Venus, Mars, and Uranus in the 10th house. Venus is wet, Mars and Uranus are dry. Well, this concludes my discussion of all the ingredients necessary to cook up a good, solid weather prognostication using the 3 charts: the temperature chart, the air movement chart, and the moisture chart. And now, let's put to practical use what we have learned.